Robert Cox is from the National Museum of Photography. He's an expert in analysing negatives and images, and would be able to tell whether Karen's photo was genuine or not.
The point with this is that it's an amateur camera. So to do manipulation of photographs, particularly in the 80s, you'd have needed quite sophisticated cameras, quite expensive cameras that would focus closely and be able to control the exposure accurately. These negatives are from the 110 camera, an amateur point-and-shoot camera, with not the range of facilities to do manipulation. I don't think the photograph has been manipulated.
After researching it, I found out that it was Bruno Hauptmann, who actually, there's a waxwork of him sitting in the electric chair in the Chamber of Horrors in Madame Tussauds. And I found that he was the so-called kidnapper and murderer of the Limburg child, the aviator in the 1930s.
So then the next thing I did was I actually went down to Madame Tussauds. I walked in there, I looked at the man that was sitting in the chair, who happened to be Bruno Hauptmann, and what was shocking to me was that my picture was absolutely identical in buttons, in the straps, the way the hands were gripped onto the chair. And the only thing that was different with mine was that to indicate he's been electrocuted, there was blue sparks coming out of both fingers.
I think it's a poster, either outside or in the carriage behind, probably of something that was happening in a show in London.
A friend of mine whose mum had passed away asked me to go along to see a medium, and I sat outside while she went in and spoke to the medium. As she was about to leave, the medium came outside and said, "I have a message for you." And I looked at him and said, "But I'm not here for a reading." And he said, "It's about your photo." And he said, "Just want you to know is that the man said, I'm accused of something that I didn't do, but I did something else." And that was the end of the message.
The King William Street Tunnel is one of the oldest and longest disused tunnels on the network. Abandoned in 1900, it stretches from Borough Station to the north side of London Bridge. Prince Holman was a project manager for the Tube's centenary celebrations during the 1980s and was asked to photograph the tunnel for a book. He and his colleague returned on several occasions, and each time they witnessed the same strange feelings.
We did a lot of experiments to get it right, and when we took the final set of photographs, there was an image of somebody standing in the sump. It was slightly translucent. Nothing was right about it. There was nobody who could have been there at the time. And I have this slide, and the slide just has written on it, "The Ghost," which is what we called it. Never thought anything about it. It's just been filed away for years. Went to pull it out, and the transparency is not there. I just checked to see if it had been misfiled, and looked through some early images of shots we'd taken down there, and surprisingly there is another photograph of the ghost in almost exactly the same position that was taken a couple of years earlier that I didn't even know about until today.
Bank Monument Station connects 6 different tube lines, making it the station with some of the longest tunnels and corridors. Cliff Archibald was checking the CCTV monitors in his office after he'd emptied and closed the station. At 2 o'clock in the morning, he noticed something strange.
I noted what appeared to be a little old lady standing in a long corridor at a dogleg junction. So I collected a station radio so I could maintain contact with my colleague and made my way through the station. As I reached the same level that she was standing on, she looked up, looked straight at me, looked down again, turned and started walking away. I actually started running down the corridor in order to catch her. By the time I got to the dogleg, she'd disappeared, which I immediately thought strange, as I knew I'd covered that ground an awful lot quicker than she could have walked from the dogleg to the stairs. I went down to the spiral staircases. Both sets of gates were still closed and padlocked. She was nowhere to be seen. Now, I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything else like that, so I wasn't going to accept the fact that something pretty spooky was going on. So I called to my colleague in the operations room to check the CCTV cameras to find out where she could have disappeared to. He checked over 100 cameras and there was no one to be seen. Looking back at my experience at Bank Monument on that particular evening, being the skeptic that I am, it will stay with me for the rest of my life as to why I can't come up with a logical explanation as to what happened.
There are thousands of staff who work behind the scenes of the underground, keeping the network moving, clean and maintained. And nearly all of these jobs take place at night when the system is closed to the public. Some jobs are more unusual than others, such as the fluffers, who collect human hair from the tunnels, blown in from people waiting on the platforms. Paul Fisher, who now works at head office, was training to be a manager in 1984, when he was asked to walk the tunnels of the Northern Line. Part of his training was to understand the procedures for all of the different tasks at first hand. And one such job Paul was required to experience was track walking, a job that involves walking on your own along the tunnels between stations after the trains have stopped, with just a torch for light.
During the walk, I think I was between Oval and Stockwell stations, I came across this clearing, bigger piece of tunnel, and there was a guy working there. And what struck me was that he had one of these old oil-type, gassy tilly lamps, he used to call them. And I remember thinking that I'm sure these have been done away with. Safety reasons, I guess, and everybody had battery torches nowadays. So I said to this guy, and I remember he looked old to me then, he's probably my age now. I said, I'm surprised you got one of those old lamps. And I forget what he said exactly, but something along the lines of he liked it better than the battery jobs. I never thought much about it. I asked him, what is this place, this clearing? He said, oh, this is South Island Places. And I forget what he explained, what he did. And that was it, really. A quick chat, and I continued walking down the tunnel to the next station, which was Stockwell, and that was where the end of my track walk was. So I phoned this chap up, told him my name, and said, I've just done a walk from here to there. And I was now clear of the track. He said, fine, okay. And just by chance, I asked him what the other guy was doing up South Island Place. I thought I'd drop that in, be a bit clever, you know. And he said, what other guy? Well, I just spoke to a guy up at South Island Place, he called it. He said, I haven't got anybody booked in my logs tonight to be working there. I said, well, there is somebody working there. I just spoke to him. If you're sure that you saw somebody down there, we certainly don't have anybody booked in for that piece of track. We'll have to search the tunnel. So as tunnel search had to go ahead. So I've gone back into the tunnel and he's come the other way. And after about 20 minutes, we met in the middle. And this old fellow with the lamp is nowhere to be seen. It's a little unnerving because it didn't kind of make sense. And the search had taken a long time. And as a result of that, the first trains had to be held up, which is not a popular thing to do. And I remember the worst part about it was that my trainer was now interviewing me in kind of a semi-disciplinary sense, because I'd delayed the trains and he wanted to know why. So I told him this story. And I remember he gave me a very old-fashioned look. He said, you know about South Island Place and the ghost stories, do you? So I said, no, and I'm sure he didn't believe me. And this was getting worse by the minute. And he said that there was a myth about some old guy had been hit by a train and killed donkeys years ago. I've no idea when. And there was supposed to be a ghost down there. So he gave me a very sideways look, and I'm sure he thought I was winding him up. So I kept stum ever since.